Good evening, everyone. I am Barry Halverson, co-chair of the Lake Lawrence Lake Management District and Washington State Lake Management District Coordinator. This presentation is targeted to provide information on products that are intended to sequester or mitigate the harmful algal blooms or cyanobacteria problems many of us are experiencing in our lakes. Here are a few rules that we'll be following. Our presentation tonight will be by John Holtz, Senior Luminologist, Solitude Lake Management, who will provide us a presentation on ALUM. John, you should be able to share your screen now. Thank you for coming and addressing our many interested lake managers.
I don't know, but anyway, my name is John Holtz. I'm a senior limnologist at Solitude Lake Management. Have quite a bit of experience working in the state of Washington. And I'm happy to be part of your process here. I was talking to Barry earlier. This is pretty unique to bring different products in and have them explain the technical aspects of them to you. I think it's a great idea, a great way to learn a lot in a short period of time. So happy to be invited. A little bit about the company I work for. We're the largest, most comprehensive lake management company in the U.S., founded in 1998. We have over 500 employees in 32 states. And really, if you can think of a service that a lake needs, we do it. From planning, testing, algae, weed control, fountains, shoreline erosion. And the last one that we're here to talk about today is nutrient inactivation. Specifically, we're going to be talking about aluminum sulfate today. A little bit about me. I have a PhD in aquatic ecology and lake management. I'm a former university professor at the University of Nebraska, if there's any Huskers in the crowd, and a former business owner. So after about 13 years of being a professor, we accomplished a lot of research in my lab that advanced our understanding of lake internal loading and nutrient inactivation, both in terms of how to dose it and also how to apply the products more precisely and effectively. So after about 13 years, me and another faculty member left the university and we started a company called HAB Aquatic Solutions. Some of you may have seen us around Washington. About 3 years ago, our company was acquired by Solitude. So some of you may know me as HAB Aquatic Solutions. And I now lead Solitude's Nutrient Inactivation and ALUM Services Division. I'm old, so I have over 30 years of experience, over 300 ALUM projects across the U.S. And last time I checked, I think I've applied over 18 million gallons of alum in my career. I serve as a technical advisor to EPA on water quality and water quality policy, mainly in the Midwest with Region 7 of EPA. I'm also very involved and active in the North American Lake Management Society. I've been on the board of directors there a few times and have received numerous awards from them, including Corporation of the Year when we owned our previous company, which I'm very, very proud of that honor. So enough about me and enough about our company. Let's get to the good stuff here. So what we're here to talk about, these first few slides aren't going to be anything earth-shattering for you all, but kind of frames the rest of the presentation, I guess. Poor water quality symptoms in poor water quality in lakes has many symptoms, most of which are associated with excessive amounts of algae. Probably the primary exception to that would be nuisance plant growth, which I understand you also have. But a lot of what I do is managing the algae. The symptoms are this excessive algae, algal toxins. If you get too much of the wrong kind of algae, the cyanobacteria, some of them can produce the algal toxins, which I know Lake Lawrence is familiar with. Low clarity, it stinks. When all that algal biomass sinks and goes down to the bottom, the bacteria begin to decompose that dead algae. And during that process, the bacteria take oxygen out of the water. So they can make a low oxygen condition worse by having a lot of algae in your lake. Potential fish kills, if you're not seeing fish kills and you have poor water quality, you're probably at least stressing the fish, probably low recruitment, low growth rates, and in extreme cases, we do see fish kills, oftentimes due to this organic biomass crash that happens, goes to the bottom of the lake, and have bacteria pull the oxygen out of the water. The other big one here is reduced recreational and property values. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. And that is a big driver. I actually have another separate presentation on that if you ever want to invite me back and talk about that. There are a lot of good studies correlating water quality with property values. On some of the previous work we did a big lake in Wisconsin, and there happened to be a husband and wife realtor team that lived on the lake, and they tracked property values after the ALUM application, and we cleaned up the lake, and they were seeing about anywhere from 15 to 20% increase in property values because word got out that Cedar Lake was the lake to be at. So that is a real thing, can help justify some of the expense, I feel. The cause of these problems is phosphorus. We've known this for a long time, since Bullenbieder published his important work back in 1968, where he measured the amount of algae in lakes all around the world, and they correlated that with how much phosphorus was coming into the lake. And you see this very nice regression line here showing that we have a strong relationship between the amount of phosphorus in a lake and the amount of algae. Furthermore, not just the amount of algae, but the amount of phosphorus in a lake has consequence on the types of algae you have. So as we go up the trophic scale through mesotrophic, eutrophic, and into hypereutrophic, when we get more and more phosphorus in the lake, not only do we start to get more algae, but this kind of blue color here, that's meant to represent the cyanobacteria. And you see that they're mostly predominant at the high end of the scale. They need a lot of phosphorus to grow, so they typically grow in lakes that have a lot of phosphorus. That's why if we can reverse the trend here and move the phosphorus down the scale, we can move it back into lower amounts of algae and better types of algae, at least from a human health perspective. What are the sources, internal and external? This very simple cartoon here is just meant to put all those phosphorus budget categories that Herrera did for you into two great big categories, internal and external. So external, that can include, precipitation, runoff, waterfowl waste, stormwater, agriculture, all of those things, groundwater, any phosphorus that originates from outside of the lake. And then we have this internal component, which is mainly driven by phosphorus that recycles out of the bottom mud into the water column, especially under periods of anoxia. You can also get some bioturbiation from fish and aquatic insects that can also promote internal loading. But the main driver is this diffuse release of phosphorus from the bottom mud. And I just put these percentages in here to remind you. At Lake Lawrence, the phosphorus budget study that you all had done indicates about 87% of the phosphorus entering your lake on an annual basis is coming from internal loading, and about 13% is coming from the watershed or external sources. So the take-home message here is if you don't address the internal loading, you're going to have limited success with your watershed efforts. You might not see any benefits at all. Some lakes don't, where they focus a lot of time and money on their external load and do not give proper attention to their internal load, which obviously this group is focusing on that. So the bottom point I made here, much of lake management, much of what we do as lake management is manage the phosphorus. Figure out how much is in there, where it's coming from, and design the best solution. A little more on internal loading. If you go down to the bottom mud here, this top graph is just showing that in the sediment, pore water, so that the water that's in between the sediment particles is extremely high in phosphorus in the bottom mud of lakes. Much, much, much higher than the amount of phosphorus that's actually in the lake water. And so it creates this gradient where the phosphorus wants to move away from the high concentrations out of the mud into the lake where the concentrations are lower. It's seeking to form an equilibrium and it's diffusing phosphorus. Even this phosphorus that's down at a depth, showing at 10 centimeters, that eventually migrates up and makes it up into the surface, to the sediment water interface, and eventually makes it into the lake for the algae to use. A little bit more on that. Most phosphorus in lake sediments is tightly bound to iron, okay? The problem with that is that phosphorus to iron bond, that chemical bond, is very weak, and especially under anaerobic conditions. So when the bottom of the lake goes anoxic, which your lake does, that iron will no longer hold on to the phosphorus. So we get this massive release of phosphorus from the bottom mud into the overlying water for the algae to use. This graph on the right here just shows for a typical lake what it might look like throughout the year. The black bar is in May. You don't see a lot of phosphorus at the bottom of the lake. So this scale is going from the surface down to the bottom of the lake, at this case 10 meters. And in May, the black line, there's not a lot of phosphorus in the bottom of the lake. That's because in May, we haven't reached anoxic conditions yet. That iron is still holding on to the phosphorus, and so we're not getting released. As we progress through the summer and that anoxic zone begins to develop at the surface of the sediments, we get higher and higher release rates as the iron starts to let go of the phosphorus. So what I'm here to talk about, the product that I'm here to discuss with you is ALUM, or aluminum sulfate is the full name. It's known as ALUM, is the trade name. ALUM applications control the phosphorus inputs from the sediments, which ultimately reduces the amount of phosphorus available for the algae growth. So in those previous slides, we were discussing internal release. What the ALUM does is it controls that internal release. And we'll get more into that as we go along. I want to point out right out front that this is not toxic. Some of you may be familiar with copper sulfate. This is not copper sulfate. This is aluminum sulfate. Copper sulfate is toxic. It kills things. Aluminum sulfate does not. It binds onto the phosphorus, lowers the amount of phosphorus in the lake, and starves the algae, so to speak. So that's how you're getting rid of the algae. You're not directly killing it. A little bit on the history of alum. It's been around for a long, long, long time. It's been used for more than 200 years for drinking water clarification. It's essential in wastewater and drinking water treatment plants today. There's even some thoughts, I can't verify this, that the ancient Egyptians used alum to tan animal hides. So it's been around for a long time. It's been used in water purification for a long time. However, us lake managers are kind of a little bit slower, I guess. It's really a stolen technology from wastewater. And someone in the literature first suggested that us, dumb lake managers might want to try it in lakes. And they suggested that in 1955. It took us a while to catch on. The first application was in Sweden in 1968. And the first application was in the US was in Wisconsin in 1970. So we've been using alum for a long time in a lot of different ways, and therefore we know a lot about it. It's safe. Alum is a common food additive. Like I mentioned before, it's essential in drinking water and wastewater treatment. If you live around Seattle, you're drinking alum in your drinking water. It's used to treat the drinking water as a coagulant and a clarifier before it's disinfected. If any of you do any canning, or anyone in your family does any canning, you might be familiar with powdered alum. You add it to keep your pickles crisp. So you can buy it in the grocery store. What we use in the lake is a liquid form. It's the same grade of alum that's used in the drinking water treatment plants. It's the NSF 60. It's the exact same stuff and has to meet the exact same standards. So we want to make sure we're not introducing any other impurities into the lake, or any impurities into the lake. As I mentioned before, alumina chemistry is extremely well understood and fortunately very predictable. So, if I add so much aluminum to the lake, I can tell you how many pounds of phosphorus it's going to bind up. It's that predictable and that well understood. There are numerous textbooks out just on aluminum chemistry. There's also hundreds of studies documenting the safe use of alum in lakes. We now are going on the 58th year of using alum in lakes. This is a mouse trap that catches a lot of mice. There's been a lot of people come along to try and come up with a better mouse trap, but from my perspective, there really is not a need. I should have mentioned at the beginning, I mentioned that I lead our nutrient inactivation division. That's not just alum. We apply the Utrazor products. We apply the Phoslock products. We're involved really with pretty much all of the products that you're considering. On large lakes, I've always, to this point, always gone back to alum because it's cheaper, it's readily available, it's really available all over the country because we use it in drinking water. It's a commodity, and it's relatively cheap. And when we're using it on a large lake, I'd like to know, I feel very confident with it. It's been around for a long time and it's well understood. So it's also endorsed by the North American Lake Management Society for use in lakes. And as I mentioned before, it's not toxic. It doesn't harm the plants or the fish. We typically see fisheries improvement after alum applications because of increased clarity and habitat. And I'll discuss that point a little bit later. So sediment inactivation with alum. Our company, we apply it with a barge shown here in the picture, or one of our barges is shown here in the picture. We have a whole fleet of barges that go from really John boat size all the way up to, huge barges that can hold, four tanker trucks of alum at a time. So we have a whole fleet of application vessels. No matter what they look like or the size of them, they're all equipped with the exact same equipment. They all are guided by GPS. They all have a computer flow control. So the computer operates a butterfly valve that opens and closes as you speed up or slow down the vessel. So you're always maintaining the target application rate. We can program it if we go outside of the zone where we want to treat, that the pumps will shut off. If any of you have an agriculture background, this is essentially an agricultural field sprayer on a lake. It's a holistic approach. It complements any external phosphorus loading reduction efforts that are going on. This is complementing them. We're working on the internal load. The watershed people are working on the external load, and it makes for a nice complementary approach there. It's applied very precisely, as I was talking about here with our specialized equipment. We do that on purpose. We do not want any gaps in the coverage. We don't want any gaps in the coverage on the lake sediments where internal loading can bypass the alum and get into the water column. We want to make sure that all the alum gets to the intended spot at the intended rate to maximize the efficiency and also cost effectiveness. That's another reason why I like working with alum. It's liquid. First of all, it's a lot easier to move around. I'd rather pump it than carry powdered bags of something. And we can also run it through the plumbing here where we can monitor the flow of the alum into the lake in real time with flow sensors. So we can get very, very precise with these liquid products. It mixes with the water. We inject it down below. You see the drop hoses there off the boom. We're injecting it down about 18 to 24 inches. That's where the flock forms. The flock is a precipitant, so as it mixes with the lake water, it forms this kind of milky, white-looking substance. I'll show you a picture here in a minute. And it's heavier than water. It's more dense than water, so it begins to sink. We inject it into the lake, so it forms the flock below the water surface. We don't want wave activity, wind, boat, whatever the wave action is caused by. We don't want this flock to blow around. We want it to sink straight down and get down to those sediments where we want it to go. If it gets too windy, we'll stop. We don't want it blowing around. So this flock settles to the bottom, and you can kind of think of the flock as kind of a phosphorus sponge, if you will. It has all of these unfilled binding sites on it. So it sinks to the bottom, and it has all these unfilled chemical binding sites that are just waiting to be activated. As soon as phosphorus hits that flock, the binding, it will be attracted to these binding sites, will bind on to the alum flock, and it's permanently bound under lake conditions at that point. It will not redissolve. It will, for all intents and purposes, it's gone from the system. It's still in the lake, but it's not bioavailable any longer. So these unfilled binding sites sit down at the bottom of the lake, and they just wait for phosphorus to come along and attach. So that might take 5 years, that might take 10 years, or Lake Morey in Vermont, we just treated that one. That one lasted 30 years. It will last as long, it will last until those binding sites get full. Once the sponge is full, it won't absorb anymore, and you would be due for a maintenance treatment at that point. The alum flock, scientifically, we call it a colloidal aluminum hydroxide flock. It's highly efficient in phosphorus binding capacity. This alumina, when it binds to phosphorus, when the phosphorus attaches to the flock, it forms aluminum phosphate complex that's very stable in the environment. And the most important thing here on this slide, I feel, to recognize is it's not sensitive to oxygen. So unlike iron, you will not redissolve under low oxygen or no oxygen conditions. So why I like using it, aluminum is the third most common element in the Earth's crust. So aluminum is everywhere. Aluminum is already in your lake. There's actually a lot of aluminum already in your lake. We're just adding a little bit more to kind of tip the scales in favor of the aluminum, force that phosphorus off of the iron, and capture it on the aluminum, where we don't have to worry about it redissolving and internally loading into the lake. It settles rapidly, settles about 1 meter every 6 or 7 minutes. And when it gets to the bottom, it forms a very thin 2 to 3 centimeter layer, a uniform layer over the bottom of the lake. After about a week or so, that gets incorporated, mixed into that unconsolidated sediment layer, and you'll never see it again. That's what we want to happen. We want it to get incorporated in the sediment, kind of get into that phosphorus, aluminum, iron battle zone in there, where it can absorb the phosphorus and keep it from coming into the lake. The picture on the right, top right here, is just a shot off the back of the barge, showing that kind of greenish, milky white substance. That's the flock. And then another one on the bottom off of one of our bigger barges, showing the flock behind the barge. Like I said, that sinks rapidly, and you'll really never see it again. Here's a cool video I have. We did a Green Lake in Seattle in 2016, and we worked with Herrera and Rob Zazette on that project. And Rob took a GoPro camera on a stick, and he ran it through the lily pads at Green Lake about a day after the alum application. And if this doesn't make you car sick, feel free to look at it. And the white substance you see on the plants and on the bottom of the lake is the alum floc. You can see a little bit of it got hung up on the plants. That will quickly get knocked off and settle down to the bottom of the lake. And in a week or two, if we came back, we would not see that white substance anymore. It would then be incorporated into the bottom of the lake. So how does it work? Phosphorus is present in lake mud in a lot of different forms. Like I've already talked a lot about the iron. It can also be in a dissolved form. It's dissolved in the sediment pore waters. It can be attached to iron. It can be attached to aluminum, calcium. There can be clays, and there can also be organic forms of phosphorus, dead algae, dead plants, whatever that might be. So we have lots of different forms of phosphorus in the bottom of the lake. This top box that I put kind of in a blue color here is what we're concerned about. All these things add up to define what we call redox P. And redox P is what can be available for internal loading. The aluminum bound, the calcium bound, all of that, we don't have to worry about that. That's already bound up. That's why we want to move the iron bound phosphorus down to this aluminum category so we don't have to worry about it anymore. Let's see. I had some animation on here that's not working, but it's not really that important. So this blue box up here, we go in and we take these sediment cores like you've had done on your lake, and we section them at different depths, and we measure what kind of phosphorus we have, how it's bound up at different depths in the sediment. And this is just a hypothetical but typical profile of what you might find. You have these high levels of redox P, this dissolved in iron-bound phosphorus that occur in the top layers of the sediment, okay? We call that the pool of available phosphorus. And when we have a lot of it, you get high phosphorus release rates. When we add the alum, what the animation would show is a straight line here, and this blue hatched area would go away. Because after an alum application, you've now bound up this pool of available phosphorus. And now when we look at the redox P, this dissolved in iron-bound phosphorus, it's uniform from top to bottom because we've made this bulge of available phosphorus go away. We've bound it up. Some of the benefits of an alum treatment, we get this immediate clarification. It's also a coagulant, so it will settle things out of the water, including the algae. So we get this immediate clarification. That's really not the intention on a sediment alum dose. We're trying to get those binding sites down to the bottom unfilled as much as we can. We don't want any interference. We don't want them to fill up as it's sinking down to the bottom. And we account for that in our dosing. We know we're going to lose some binding sites. We lose anywhere from about 1 to 3% of the binding sites as it falls through the water column. So we account for that in the dose. This is Spring Lake, Minnesota. First day of application, our barge operator just stuck his head out the wheelhouse and took a picture of the lake. That's what it looked like when we got there. And this is what it looked like on the last day of application. So we get this immediate clarification. I always tell people if you're going to sell your home or property on the lake, sell it right after the alum application, and it'll look like you're in Jamaica. That it won't last. It won't be quite that clear as we go forward when the algae kind of rebounds into the water column at a lower level. But right afterwards, it's pretty impressive. The benefits, the control of the sediment phosphorus release. This is my favorite nerd slide as a limnologist. This is really an outstanding result in the field of lake management. And this is typical of what we see in our lakes. This is Bald Eagle Lake in the Minneapolis region. The consultant went in and collected sediment cores of Bald Eagle Lake at 5 different sites. So these are the 5 sites along here. They collected them in 2011. They take these sediment cores back into the lab. They make the sediment go anoxic, and they measure how much phosphorus comes off, okay? So before we added the alum to the lake, you can see these high rates of sediment phosphorus release. And it depends on where you're at in the lake. The deeper parts here, like site 4, we're releasing more phosphorus than some of the other sites. Then we come in and we did an alum application in 2014, and they went back 3 years after the alum application and collected the same sediment cores, same location, treated them exactly the same way, measured the sediment release rates at that time, and you can see they were reduced anywhere from 85 to 99%. So this is amazing in the world of lake management, to be able to literally shut off the internal load of phosphorus into these lakes. Very impressive. If I was giving this presentation to my peers, a group of nerds, I'd probably get a standing ovation right now, but I don't know. Another benefit, we get this extreme phosphorus and algae reduction. This is White Lake, North Carolina. When we got there, it was not white anymore. This was October 2017 before the treatment, and then the next spring after the treatment. You can see the difference visually there. We typically get anywhere from a 50 to 90% reduction in water column phosphorus. So that's the phosphorus actually suspended in the lake water, and a corresponding reduction in the algae. Usually if you reduce the phosphorus by 70%, you get somewhere around a 70% algae reduction as well, because we have this tight correlation between phosphorus and algae. We also get increased water clarity and a reduction, or in most cases, an elimination of algal toxins. This is because we're switching, as we lower the phosphorus, it's favoring the types of algae that do not produce the toxins. This is Upper Prior Lake, also in the Minneapolis region. This was 2019, just before, this was the year before our alum application. July 2020 would have been about 3 months after the alum application. One of the homeowners had access to get some aerial photography done. The other interesting thing I think about this site is 2019, this was pre-COVID. So all the boats and rafters are out here recreating, and they all have their boats all strapped together. No social distancing at all. You turn to 2020, when we have the corona outbreak, you can now see everyone's still out there recreating and partying, but now they're maintaining some level of social distance. So interesting photo. We also get this improved fisheries. We can't document this on all our projects because not everyone goes out and does fish surveys before and after the alum applications, but the ones that do it, we do see an improvement in the fishery, mainly because we're getting better clarity, which can lead to some better habitat and structure for the fish in terms of ridded macrophytes, for example. But we also see this indirect effect of a slight increase in oxygen as well. We no longer have all this algal biomass going down to the bottom and decomposing. You have less algae in your lake. And when that algae dies every year, you have less decomposition and less bacteria taking the oxygen out of the lake. So it's an indirect effect, but in a roundabout way, we do see some improvements in oxygen and fish and fishery as well. Washington Lake experience, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lakes, I believe. Black Lake, which I will talk about in detail here in a minute. Blacksmith's Lake, we did in 2025. Lake Fenwick, Green Lake in Seattle, Hart Lake, Lake Ketchum, we've done multiple applications there. Long Lake, Moses Lake, we did a demonstration project there. Wapato and Walkoff Lake are the lakes we've worked at in Washington so far. Whole variety of sizes there. I'm going to talk in a little bit more detail about Black Lake, Washington. There are a lot of similarities to this lake, to Lake Lawrence, I feel like. Similar in size. Black Lake is a little larger. Maximum depth 29 feet, mean depth 19 feet. History of poor water quality, including alkotoxin health alerts. Where Black Lake differs somewhat from Lake Lawrence is the phosphorus budget. So at Black Lake, 40% of the annual phosphorus budget or phosphorus load was coming from external sources, and 60% was coming from internal loading. Recall your lake is 13% and 87%. So you have significantly more internal loading, which is good if you're considering these internal loading, these products to address internal loading, because the project will likely be much more successful because you are addressing a higher percentage of the phosphorus. Oh, by the way, the other thing I was going to point out here, this is an application map that our onboard software spits out. So the GPS tracking, it will follow every pass that we make on the lake. And if you look real closely in here, all these are individual lines. So each one of these lines, we treated the lake going this direction. Each one of these lines is an actual run of the barge. And you can see there's no gaps in between. We're very careful about that. And at Black Lake, we have two different dosing zones, a higher dose in the middle, deeper area, excuse me, and then a lighter dose, which is represented in green here. And our software can easily handle that. We can have multiple dosing zones. I think the most we've had is 9 different dosing zones. And what's nice about the software, as we move across these dosing zones, we download a dose zone map to our software. That becomes our prescription map. So the barge knows when we get into a different dose zone, and it will open up the valves to let more alum out or restrict alum flow to meet the target rate. It's really pretty idiot-proof. Here's what a typical alum application setup looks like. This is the Black Lake. The liquid alum is delivered in 5,000-gallon tanker trucks, like you would see delivered gasoline. We immediately offload it into onshore storage. We do not work from the truck. We do not rely on truck drivers to be on time. We get it off the trucks immediately. So we have a surplus of alum on the shore. So if there's a delay in a delivery, we don't have to wait. Our goal is to keep the barge moving constantly. It also allows us to adapt to the weather. If we get a windy day and we have to shut down, we can still accept some alum deliveries so we can maintain our trucking schedule. If we have really good conditions and we want to work longer that day, maybe even into the evening, if the project allows, we have a surplus of alum there that we can use instead of waiting for the next delivery. So we just back it up, put it into the storage shanks, and then we have pumps that transfer it from the storage shanks onto the barge. What's nice about our system, and we do this for health reasons, it's a completely closed system. Everything is cam lock. So there are 2 filling ports on the front of the barge. There's no exposure to the air, if you will. We do not just sling a hose into the top of an open tank and let it splash around. It's a closed system. It's safe. It's safer that way for everyone. At Black Lake, we applied 234,000-ish gallons of alum and about 117,000 gallons of sodium aluminate. I haven't talked about sodium aluminate yet. I will here in a minute. We applied that over 17 days in late March, early April of 2021. Alum is a lower pH aluminum product. Sodium aluminate also contains alum, so it's also, aluminum. So it's also an aluminum product, but it has a higher pH. So on lakes where there's not a lot of buffering capacity or alkalinity, like we see a lot in Washington, we will add the two products simultaneously. So we're adding one low pH, one high pH, and then we end up with a neutral pH. We'll hear some people criticize alum sometimes and say, oh, well, you might end up with a pH issue. That's really kind of, in my opinion, kind of a silly criticism. We manage pH in every aspect of our society. pH management is relatively easy. You just add an acid and a base and you end up with a neutral product. So that's not a concern, especially with our equipment. We have designed it to handle both products. At Black Lake, the full dose was added in one application. It was not phased. Alum applications can be phased. In fact, I would recommend phasing them into 2 or 3 applications at a minimum. Sometimes funding or permitting doesn't allow that. At Black Lake, it was added all in one application. Data from Thurston County, there's been some monitoring done, goes back even farther than 2010, but I just cut it off there. Here I'm looking at the total phosphorus concentration near the bottom of the lake. So this gives us an idea of how much phosphorus is coming out of the mud. And before the alum treatment, here you can see the years along the x-axis from 2010 to 2025. The alum application occurred here at the early part of 2021. So this here is the average before we added the alum. It's about 208 micrograms per liter of total phosphorus near the bottom of Black Lake. After the application, it was reduced by about 83% to about 35 micrograms per liter. So that's because of the alum. The aluminum is now down there binding onto the phosphorus, is no longer bound to the iron, and when the bottom of the lake goes anoxic, we're not getting that release, and so we're not picking it up in the bottom waters of the lake anymore. 2024, there was no data collected, so that's why that's missing along with 2017. So now moving up in the water column, let's look at the phosphorus concentration near the surface of Black Lake. And that's the goal here, right? If we shut off the supply from the sediments, we're going to get less diffusion into the water column, and we're going to get less phosphorus in the water column all the way up to the surface where the algae are growing and need the phosphorus. So before that, before the alum application, we had an average of about 29 micrograms per liter over that 10-year period. After the alum application, it was reduced by about half, 48%, to 15 micrograms per liter. Again, no data was collected in 2024 and 2017. That's why those bars are missing. Water clarity. Oops, I got the wrong title on here. This should say Secchi disc clarity. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the Secchi disc, a black and white painted disc. We lower it down into the water. When we can no longer see it, we record that depth, and we call that Secchi disc clarity or transparency. So this is an inverted scale. 0 is the surface of the lake going down to 9 meters. And the farther these blue bars extend down, the greater the water clarity, okay? So before the treatment, the average was about 1.73 meters. After, it increased about 2.5 times to about 4.46 meters. Unfortunately, we don't have any more recent readings in 2024 and 2025. So it would have been better if we had those, but I don't. I can tell you that, the commissioners at Black Lake have told me that they have not had any significant algal blooms since we did the alum application. So it's going good there. Trying to think. Oh, another important difference here between Black Lake and Lake Lawrence, why I would expect it to work perhaps even better in Lake Lawrence, is remember that Black Lake had 40% of the phosphorus coming from the water column. So if we back up here, we see this great reduction in phosphorus at the bottom. So the alum is doing a really good job, 83% reduction. Normally, we would expect to see a similar, 60 to 80% reduction in surface phosphorus. But we didn't quite see that amount of reduction at Black Lake because they are getting more phosphorus that's bypassing the alum at the bottom of the lake that's coming in from the watershed. Okay, so if that, so we're getting some influence of external load in the water column phosphorus, and I would not expect to have that much at Lake Lawrence. I'm going to go through a couple of the things that you all had on your questionnaire. Just address those here so we can, if there's any questions or comments about them, we can handle that today. The water quality and lake response, it will improve the dissolved oxygen concentrations, as we talked about, to some degree by reducing the organic matter processing by the bacteria. And those bacteria are removing the oxygen. So less bacteria, better oxygen conditions. There's no meaningful pH impact expected, especially the way we manage the pH with the buffer. We expect a consistent and effective phosphorus removal from the water column. It strips the phosphorus right out of the water column as that floc sinks. We expect a strong and permanent long-term binding in the sediments. It will continue to bind until those binding sites are full. A typical dose will last 5 to 10 years in lakes that have high internal loading. Lake Mooring in Vermont, it's in a highly forested, undeveloped part of Vermont. So there's very, 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 very low external loading. It's almost all internal loading. And like I said, that dose lasted 30 years. So it will last until the phosphorus binding sites get full. The binding sites don't care where the phosphorus comes from. They don't care if it's internal or external. So if you do a poor job of controlling your external load, it won't last as long because those binding sites will fill up with external phosphorus. We do, as I mentioned, expect multi-year longevity. I think I read somewhere you were hoping to get 3 to 5 years. I would hope for better than that, but certainly it would meet your goal there. We would expect demonstrated, well, there has been demonstrated reductions in bloom frequency and duration. That's not to say you will never get a bloom. Some cases, like Black Lake, they said they haven't. Sometimes in some of our lakes that started out with really, really, really bad water quality, they might get a bloom for a week or two in late summer. But it's usually pretty short-lived and not near as intense as what they had been used to. No risk of short-term bloom stimulation. On the short term, we're eliminating the bloom, we're sinking it out. This was one of our bigger barges here. I took this opportunity to show you some of our other equipment here. Implementation and flexibility is easily applied in increments. With alum, so we're at a, let's just say in a lake that we come into, we're at a polluted state, and we want to move that lake to an unpolluted state. And there is some resistance to move into that state, right? It's like we need to push the marble over the hump. And so what we like to do is we like to add at least 40 to 50% of the total dose at a minimum at the first application. If you do it in 3 applications, do 50%, 25%, 25%, something like that. Those later applications, by the way, you're really not going to see much more benefit. You're already going to see tremendous benefit after the first application. The subsequent smaller doses are really for the longevity. So we've had that happen before, actually at a lake in Omaha, Nebraska, where we came in and we did the first 50% dose, and they said, oh, this lake looks so good, and they canceled the other 2. And so then it didn't last as long as they wanted. So word of caution there. It performs reliably across lake conditions. The only caveat to that is we don't get optimal flock formation when water temperature gets down below 42 degrees Fahrenheit. So we do the applications when the water temperature is above 42 degrees, just so we're maximizing the flock formation for you. That tends to not be a problem because most of the times that I would recommend to treat your lake, the water temperature is going to be above that anyway. I'm not even sure if your lake goes below that in your climate. I'm not sure how it looks. Recommended ratio for sediment inactivation in Washington, we typically use 20:1, and that looks like what Herrera was using as well, as best I can tell. There are no shipping and handling costs to have the alum delivered. That's all included in the when we purchase the alum. The best method is inject, because it's a liquid, to inject it from a moving barge with this specialized equipment. It entails a closed system, GPS guided flow control, 2 separate channel application system for multiple products. So like, for example, on this barge here, 2 of the tanks on the barge, if we're doing a buffered application, will hold sodium aluminate, and 3 will hold alum. We apply it at a 2:1 ratio, 2 gallons of alum to every gallon of sodium aluminate, and we can control all that with the software. But if you're going to do a buffered application, I highly recommend that you utilize specialized equipment from a safety point of view and also for more effective application. I'm estimating it to take about 7 12-hour days to do a full dose. That would be doing sorry, I'm gonna look at my notes here. What is it? 7,275 pound reduction in phosphorus that Herrera suggested. To add that amount of alum at a 20:1 ratio would take our crew with our equipment about 7 12-hour days, or 84 working hours. Lump sum cost estimate to hold the whole ball and wax be about 800,000, I think. Yeah, right around 800,000. You divide that by 72.75, you end up with about $110 per pound of phosphorus bound up. Monitoring and regulatory, this will be dependent on the Department of Ecology and what they're requiring of permitting. Typically, you will be required to do 4 more lab tests before, during, and after the treatment, as the permit requires. I was sitting in with some discussions with Ecology a couple of months ago where they were reviewing their nutrient inactivation standards and asking for inputs on some technical guidance. I don't expect any major changes, but they are better educated, I will say that. We, as a contractor, we measure pH while we're doing our application, just to make sure we're not seeing any dramatic pH shifts due to the treatment. So that is one thing that we will monitor no matter what the permit says. And it is fully approved in your state for the intended use. Permitting, by the way, is different in every state. Washington is one of the more rigorous states. When we work in Minneapolis, for example, we just have to send the state a letter saying, basically, we know what we're doing and we're going to do it right. They just want to know when it's going to happen. So every state is different. Ecological and human safety. No known harm based on field use. Is safe. The only problem you can get into with the alum is if you don't manage the pH. That's why I recommend you use proper equipment and someone who is skilled with that. There's no known risk to human, pet, wildlife safety. And I think I addressed the comments on your survey there. I understand you also want me to fill that survey out and send that in, which I will do, Barry. I just wanted to put them into this presentation so they're fresh on everyone's mind and as we go into discussion here.
Well,
here's my contact information. Contact me anytime. If you have product questions about ALUM or any of the other projects, like I said, our company has technical background in the products you're looking at.
Here is our contact information at Lake Lawrence. I'll give you a second. If you liked this presentation, please give us a thumbs up. Here are a few other videos you might find educational and interesting. And hit the subscribe button in the lower right corner to get automatic notifications when the new videos are posted to this YouTube channel. Hope you all have a great day.